Recently, we've had some pretty big reveals in terms of forms. We got 3 brand new big ones that we've never seen before. I mean, 4 if you count Ultra Ego, and 5 if you count Ultimate Piccolo. Maybe 6 if you want to count Granola's double red eye form. Never mind. That's besides the point. Today, we're going to be focusing on 3 different forms that have just been revealed. Gohan and Piccolo got new forms that are unlike anything we've ever seen before. Meanwhile, in the manga, Frieza showed up with a brand new form, saying he trained for 10 years to obtain it. So back to that little tangent I had before, why am I only discussing these 3 forms instead of all the other stuff that we've been shown recently? Well, these 3 are particularly interesting because they essentially break power scaling. Honestly, this could be said for a lot of Dragon Ball Super, but these 3 happen within the same time frame, and in the simplest terms, they're crazy. They're completely insane. So let's discuss all 3 of the forms and the future of them. Now, before I start with this, there's something important to note. We know absolutely nothing about these forms as of now. Maybe in the future we'll know a little bit more, but there's a reason that these 3 are all in one video. If I made a separate video for each form, that would be pretty much like 2 minutes. Most of the things that people say about these forms are speculation or theories. However, this video will be focused on what we do know for sure, as well as discussing what it means for power scaling, and from what little we know, there are some pretty interesting points. We'll definitely see more of these in the future and learn a little bit more about them. But for now, let's go off what we've been shown and try to explain as much as possible, while also discussing how crazy this is in terms of power scaling. First, let's start off with Piccolo, my personal favorite character. And yeah, in case you couldn't tell, I'm pretty happy to see him with the new form. Although it's kind of weird how he got Ultimate and then got outdated instantly, being immediately surpassed by the Orange form, but whatever. Maybe we'll see Ultimate used more, but we can kind of ignore it since that's no longer his peak, and we're talking about the peak of their power here. So for Piccolo, we'll be focusing on his Orange form. Congrats to that Ultimate form that lasted for like 10 minutes before it got surpassed. And there's some pretty interesting things to note about the Orange form, not just in terms of power scaling, but in terms of what we'd actually been told. There's a statement from Toriyama that even says he has power on par with Goku and co. And granted, that is a very vague statement, but still. Saying he has power on par with Goku and co. is a pretty important thing to say, considering the fact that even base Goku is incredibly overpowered by this point, which is another discussion for another day, and I'm sure most of you already know the extent of that. But likely that statement is more so comparable to Goku's other forms rather than just his base. That would just be the absolute lowball for what that means. And honestly, it makes more sense for the statement to be referring to Goku's higher forms after all. Let's look at what actually happened in Super Hero. While Piccolo couldn't defeat Cell Max, he put up a pretty good fight against him. And we also have some info about Cell Max's power too. First of all, it's apparently someone that Goku and Vegeta may have struggled with, according to Piccolo at least. But we also have another statement from Toriyama himself that says even Broly couldn't defeat Cell Max. And you're not mishearing me, he said Broly. Which, granted, again, is kind of a vague statement, like we could be talking about base Broly from the Broly movie, or we could talk about his absolute peak in power. That full power form he was using against Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta. Either statement is kind of insane. But let's be conservative here and say it's Broly from the Broly movie with his base form. A very low ball because this is the power that Broly could actually utilize fully. And it's also really worth noting that with Toriyama's statement, it says that if Cell Max had been completing according to his plan, Broly wouldn't be able to defeat him. But that's if he were completed. But alongside that, the only part of Cell that wasn't complete was the brainwashing part. So maybe the power he had in the movie was what his power would have been if he were completed. Although we can't know for sure. But you can already kind of see what I'm getting at. This low ball places Piccolo around Broly's level. Piccolo was able to kind of hold off Cell Max, not for a long time, but still it's worth noting that he was able to put up a pretty good fight, while also weakened himself. If we highball it though, who the hell knows? What if it means current Broly with his full power form? That's how utterly insane this is. Even if we're talking full power Broly from the last movie, you saw how strong Broly was in that movie. Super Saiyan Broly held off Super Saiyan Blue Goku and Vegeta. And once he went full power, he was actually kind of exchanging blows with Super Saiyan Gogeta. But like I said, all of it's very vague. I'm just trying to outline the implications here and how insane it is. Whether you lowball or highball from those statements, it is still a pretty huge leap in power, especially considering it came from a wish. Which is funny because he's not even the first or second person to wish for more power and become incredibly strong from that. But from what I said, let's establish a theoretical, vague baseline here based on what little we know. And there's a reason I keep saying that, it's because I want to make it clear that this is all a very vague theoretical baseline. Nothing is confirmed yet. This could and will probably change in the future. I'm just trying to outline how crazy this is regardless of what their actual powers are. So we've established that Cell Max is likely stronger than full power Broly. We also know for a fact that Cell Max is stronger than Piccolo, but Piccolo still put up a pretty decent fight, so the gap shouldn't be too huge. That would mean for this theoretical baseline, let's do this. Cell Max is stronger than Orange Piccolo, who is around the same strength as full power Broly. Now that we've established that, let's go to Gohan. Ultimate Gohan in Super was already pretty busted. I've discussed that before, and there's a very heated debate around that too. So Gohan was already pretty strong to begin with, but now we have Beast, which one-shotted Cell Max, somewhat casually too, while also not fully charged up. Originally, Gohan was charging an attack in Ultimate, but he couldn't actually do it in time. In this form, he does it basically instantly. Now it's also worth noting that the Makanko Sappo is inherently a more powerful attack, and they were hitting a weak point on Cell Max, so keep that in mind. But still, it is a very impressive feat here, especially considering what we've already established with Cell Max. This form was already kind of teased in Dragon Ball Super 2 with Gohan saying he wanted to work towards a new form, and whether or not this was the intentional continuation of that, that's also worth noting. However, this form is still incredibly vague, even more so than Piccolo. We have even less to go on here, not just in terms of statements, but also screen time. We don't really see much of this form. But again, based on what we know, let's go back to that very theoretical power scale that I had before. Cell Max above Orange Piccolo, who was around full power Broly. Gohan would be above Cell Max, and it wouldn't just be a little bit above him, he should be considerably above Cell Max. I can say that from what little we saw, from this form alone, he's likely above Blue Goku and Vegeta, together. Even if we're just talking from the Broly movie and not from the current arcs, you cannot underestimate how crazy of a statement that is. And still, that's honestly kind of a low ball. If we're highballing it, well, who the hell knows where Gohan's power is, or Piccolo's for that matter. Now, you see why I'm saying this is breaking power scaling? From these theoretical power scales that I established, the increase in power that both Gohan and Piccolo saw was absurdly high, to say the least. And that leads to some pretty interesting outcomes. One could be that Gohan and Piccolo's powers here were completely overblown, and maybe they'll be nerfed in the next arc or whatever. Another outcome is they are actually as strong as we've seen here, and will be fighting alongside Goku and Vegeta against comparable villains. And knowing Dragon Ball Super, another outcome that could definitely happen is that Goku and Vegeta will create a huge gap between them and Gohan and Piccolo, which would mean Gohan and Piccolo are as strong as we're implying here, and would also mean Goku and Vegeta are growing exponentially, which already is occurring and has occurred before. In any of those scenarios, somebody's getting a huge buff. It's just a matter of who has the craziest buff and how big that buff is. But we're going to touch on that a bit later, because now let's actually go over to Frieza. Frieza's broken as is. We've seen this already. We saw it with his introduction. He was strong to begin with, so much so to the point where he had to actually make forms to suppress his power, rather than using transformations to power up beyond his base. We saw this in Resurrection F. He trained for 4 months and somehow went from Namek level to Super Saiyan Blue level. We saw this in the Tournament of Power too. He was stuck in a cocoon in hell, and that was still enough for him to train, getting better control over Golden and still being incredibly strong and a useful addition to the team. He even put up a very decent showing against Broly. Like, how is he able to live against Broly for an hour? How? Frieza is busted to begin with, and we know his potential is even crazier than that, which makes the ending of the Granola arc even more insane, considering the fact that not only did Frieza unlock a new form, but he did so by training for 10 years. 10 years. We saw how much 4 months increased this dude's strength, so imagine 10 years of that. And this is another example of how power scaling is just being thrown out the window and everything is just not mattering anymore. Realistically, by this point, he should be far beyond any God of Destruction or Goku and Vegeta, and we know for a fact he actually is beyond Goku and Vegeta. He one-shotted Ultra Instinct Goku, Ultra Ego Vegeta, and Gas. Very casually too for all of them. Frieza should definitely be exponentially stronger by now, with unfathomable strength, and unless they have a new explanation for how Frieza's training has slowed down or something, if we go with what we've been shown before, I don't even know how I describe Frieza's strength. With the same logic we've seen beforehand, anything short of him being beyond the Gods of Destruction would honestly be a huge nerf for him, especially considering the fact they trained for 10 years. Hell, even if Goku and Vegeta trained for that long too, I would basically expect them to be the strongest things besides the Angels and Zeno. Frieza's power should be unsurpassable. But, just like with the last two, a lot of things that we have so far are pretty vague. All we know is that Frieza trained for 10 years and has a new form. One that was strong enough to one-shot Goku, Vegeta, and Gas. But like I mentioned, maybe there is a new explanation, like, with more training, his growth slowed down despite his insane potential. Maybe they'll explain it like that. Or maybe it's the same as before and he actually is growing as exponentially powerful as he did before. Maybe his training wasn't as intense as he made it seem. Either way, the increase in power for these three is absolutely absurd. I've said the words absurd, crazy, and insane so many times in this video, but I genuinely do not know how to describe these other three forms. You saw what I was saying with Piccolo and Gohan too. Even with the low balls, I can't wrap my head around how big the power growth is there. And Frieza, that's a completely different story, literally because he's from the manga. But jokes aside, we've already seen how crazy the power scaling can get in Dragon Ball Super. On multiple occasions, Goku and Vegeta have been shown to grow incredibly fast. Hell, most of the characters have been shown to grow incredibly fast. It's been like this for a while with Super. I've even touched upon it before with other videos too. But now it's going to a whole new level because we're starting at a different baseline. Like, go back to Battle of Gods. Yeah, that growth in power was insane. Going from where everyone was in the Buu Saga to Goku getting Super Saiyan God. That's a massive increase, but we're starting at a much different baseline here. All these characters that are already God level or beyond that, and that's who everyone's being compared to. And now, not only are they growing stronger, but they're getting new forms beyond that too. It's not like it's just their base form growing or they're growing on top of what they already have. they're growing while also getting new forms on top of that too to multiply their power even further. The massive threats we've seen in the past with Dragon Ball Super aren't as crazy anymore. Like Orange Piccolo alone, the weakest of these three. He could be in a realm of power similar to that of Broly or Jiren. He definitely would make Merge Zamasu look like a joke. Also from that arc, Vegito Blue for that matter. So many things from the arc's past just look like a joke in comparison to him. And that's Piccolo. And we have Gohan too, who grew so much in such a short amount of time. No matter how insane we're told Hybrid Saiyan potential is, showing is more effective than telling, and from what we've been shown, his potential is seemingly way crazier than he thought. Especially when you want to consider the fact that he somehow unlocked a form beyond Ultimate, which is literally drawing out all of your potential, which is another thing I find funny about the Beast form. If Ultimate is drawing out all his potential, Beast being beyond that is just, what? It's stronger than a form that literally draws out all of Gohan's power? What is going on there? And we've discussed enough about Frieza. You already know how unbelievable that is, and I don't need to hammer that home even more. Now this video isn't me saying these forms are bad either. I actually love the idea of Orange Piccolo. The design for Beast Gohan has grown on me, and as for Frieza, well, if he's training for 10 years, it's completely deserved that he has a new form. Even though I think the design could possibly be better. The video is more so focusing on the actual power behind these forms. And even with all these assumptions and vague statements, the leap in power is just what makes the previous leaps in power look like nothing. And it makes me wonder, what's going to happen going forward too with these? Not just with them either, but also what's going to happen with Goku, Vegeta, and any other characters that we get introduced to. How much more involved will Gohan and Piccolo be in the story? What's going to happen with Frieza, and how is that going to be rectified? And I didn't even really touch upon the timeline for these arcs in this video, or all the promotional statements about superhero and whatnot, which have some even wilder implications for the power. But again, I'm just trying to go off what we actually do know for sure, and making assumptions based on that. Honestly, I just see more huge leaps in power like this in the future too, and I'm not too sure how I feel about that. The meathead side of me wants to say, oh yeah, this is raw, this is awesome. But there's also another part of me that's just like, yeah, I get it already. But let me know what you guys think below. How strong do you think these forms are? What do you think is going to happen with them next in the future? And what implications does it have for the series as a whole? It is a discussion video after all, so let's start discussing. Anyways, if you liked the video, be sure to drop a like, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.